for this section versus just trying to find new information on that. So, okay, so no. So hands up if you're interested in perimeter security. Okay, cool. And then just interested in finding out more about AFWERX. Wonderful. Okay, so this event now is going to be streamed live to some people on Facebook Live, and then we're also going to be recording this, just so you all know. So I'm going to be introducing AFWERX to the broader audience, and I'm going to be inviting a few different people up on stage to a bit of a Q&A panel, which I'll be moderating. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A session. We've got 60 minutes for this. Let me know when we're ready, Bobby.
All right.
And during the question portion, because we are broadcasting this live, I'll be walking around with the microphone. So if you could wait till I get to you.
So George, you'll be the first person coming up. When you're here and you're sitting on there, you don't need to come up yet. Okay. I'll introduce you. I'll introduce you first, and then we'll get the whole panel. It's always out. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Morning, everybody, and welcome to our first Friday event here at the AFWERX Innovation. See in front of me, an audience of many people physically here with us, broader audience digitally by Facebook Live, and I'm also recording this and releasing this future. So my name is Matt Walton. I'm the interim director of this facility here in Las Vegas. I just wanted to share with you a little bit of information just on AFWERX, how it's built. And we're going to get into that. How this first Friday event fits into some of the broader things that we're looking at AFWERX. So AFWERX is an initiative across the Air Force, led by in DC, depending on, to try and figure out how we can drive innovation within the Air Force, how we can find solutions to problem sets from a variety of sources. Could be from within the Air Force themselves, could be with some major contractors. Okay, that's that. Want me to start again? I'll just keep going. So the difference between AFWERX, which is a very broad, I guess, initiative across the Air Force, and then this particular innovation hub, is that this hub, which I'm interim director of, is a physical facility here in Las Vegas, primarily to connect the local and broader American startup community to the Air. It's obviously this principle across the Air Force, non-secure setting, innovation, how we can actually bring into this. We're going to be running a number of events that we'll be inviting people to, as well as when our facility is fully operational, we'll actually have a whole bunch of teams and businesses actually working from here. We've got a prototyping, concepting, ideation space downstairs as well, where we can actually prototype stuff on this. One of the things that we have, one of the initiatives that we have is this idea of First Friday, which is today, 2nd February, where we'll set a theme. This month's theme is how can you utilize autonomous systems for the problems that are perimeter security. So shortly we'll have a panel discussion on that topic. Additionally to that, what we're also going to do is use this opportunity to introduce the broader community to some of the faces of the Air Force. And I'd like to just ask George Shelton just to come up on stage with me. George is the first person I will be introducing to you. So George, why don't you grab a seat and grab a microphone? Thanks for coming. So George, George is the Director of Business Operations of the 99th Contracting Squadron here at Nellis, Deputy Wing Commander, but really has a focus on small business matters and helping connect small businesses to the Air Force. So, with that in mind, George, I'm imagining that. Is that on? So I'm imagining that some of the things that I've been tasked to try and do with this innovation hub, you've been doing for for quite some time. Is that right?
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Mark, and first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me and my partners out here. It was very exciting. I'm glad to be here. I think it's going to be really something going on. I've been involved with small business. I'm the deputy commander to the wing commander for small business. In the small business community for years has been a source of innovation, and I think this fits in. And I like to be a part of that, and I hope they get with our small business community and close this.
So what are some of the things that you've been working on? I know you've been doing this work for a long time. What are some of the things you have been doing with it?
Well, Knox Air Force Base is a very exciting place to be. We do a lot of things for the Air Force, and about 70% of our dollars is spent in small business. So we participate in almost every aspect of the base, from construction to consulting, the high end we talk about, and just management stuff. So
And is there anything you find that's worked particularly well in connecting the small business community with the Air Force?
Yes. Funny enough, the unmanned aerial, the predators, we do have small businesses running those programs up there. They're research and development. And we know that small businesses can.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in to see us, and I know you're going to stay behind after this to answer any questions that anybody has.
Absolutely.
So I'll give a round of applause to George, please. All right, so next we're going to move into a panel discussion. I've got a number of people to introduce. Actually, if you wouldn't all mind just coming up and grabbing a seat as I go through these introductions. All of you, yeah, Barry, Todd, Marie. So we have two talking sticks. Yeah. All right, so move across from left to right. So person sitting next to me here is Todd Hanning. So Todd recently worked with AFWERX, which is similar to what we're trying to do with AFWERX. It's an innovation lab for Special Operations Command. Prior to that, I did 4 years in industry with AeroVironment, leading small unmanned systems supplied to the Department of Defense, where he was the business development director for special operations and also was a program manager. Currently, he's with AFWERX, which is the non-profit that's actually running AFWERX Innovation Hub. He designed this beautiful space that we're currently sitting in this building, and is also responsible for building it on time and under budget. No small task. Next to Todd, we have Baron McNeil. He's the Senior Director of, is it AECOM? How do I pronounce it? AECOM's Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operations Program. Experience both as a government contractor to the military as well as direct military experience. He retired not too long ago as Lieutenant Colonel at Nellis. And most recently supporting America's most critical remote piloted aircraft system. Another acronym we could have, RPA. Next we have Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Zani, Commander of the 99th Contracting Squadron at Nellis, leading a team of acquisition professionals and providing business advice and acquisition support for the Nellis Creech and the Nevada Test and Training Range. Welcome, Jonathan. And sitting next to Jonathan is Captain Thomas Medichik, Operations Officer for the 99th Security Force Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base, responsible for all the law enforcement, security protocols, including patrols, and securing the perimeter. And that's why you're here. So just to remind you all then, so this is our theme for the month. It's how can you use some form of unmanned system, aerial, non-aerial, to help with perimeter security. So I'm going to be asking some questions of this distinguished panel. They're going to give you some answers. And then we're going to leave time after we finish with this panel for anybody from the audience, both the physical audience that's actually here with us today, but also the digital audience that we have. And Bobby at the back of the room is going to be just going through any comments and questions that we're actually getting from that audience too. So anybody out there watching this currently on our live stream, please feel free to add a comment and question, and if we can get to it, we certainly shall. Okay. So, starting off, one of my tasks here is to decipher Air Force terminology and very quickly learning a new language of acronyms. Not quite there yet, but one of my tasks is to try and, I guess, communicate to the other community, whether it be the academic community, the general public, startup entrepreneurs or small business owners, what some of these topics mean and how they may be able to get involved. So the first question I'd just like to ask you all is, the topic is perimeter security. So whoever feels best to answer this question, what sort of perimeters are we looking at protecting? What sort of terrains are these perimeters actually in? What sort of environments are they in? Just to give a flavor and a sense of the range of perimeters that we have.
So Mark, I think the problem set as red.
Okay, yeah, let's say that's something.
How about that? So I think the problem set for perimeters is very broad. As everyone knows, the Air Force is operating in all types of environments around the world. So we're looking at any type of environment ranging from desert to cold weather, day, night. Could be a flat terrain, it could be mountainous terrain, maybe some vegetation. But we're looking for a system that can sort of transcend all those environments and be very flexible and agile and able to protect the Air Force wherever it might end up.
Anybody else would like to add to that? Yes, that's good. So it could literally be, so it could be an active airfield, could be another facility, could be in the desert in 120 degrees in summer, could be -20 in snow. Literally lots of different types of terrain and environment.
Absolutely. Anywhere in the world, really. Anything from a fixed base, a large traditional airfield, to maybe a missile site, maybe a temporary location like a plane crash location that will need to be secured. So very, very broad problem set.
Cool.
Lots of opportunities there to improve it.
Cool. Barry, maybe I'll ask this question of you. Is there anything specific to an active airfield? We've heard that airfields are one of these things that needs a perimeter. So is there anything specific to an active airfield, an active runway, that's relevant to this discussion that makes it unique?
Yes, certainly. So as we look at, just as the commercial environment is very concerned about airspace deconfliction, private drone operators and hobbyists maintaining safety with flying aircraft, you're going to have those same problem sets on military installation in airfield and Air Force Base in particular. Obviously, Nellis has a lot of traffic flying in and out every single minute of the day, and usually almost 24 hours a day. So anytime you incorporate another air vehicle into that traffic environment, that pattern environment, you need to think about the deconfliction that has to take place, how to separate the surveillance assets from the airplanes that are taking off and landing, doing other missions in the local area or uprange. You've got to have a good system to recognize where those drones are, where those unmanned vehicles are, how to deconflict them, and obviously if there are emergency situations, how to keep everybody in the air safe from each other. Okay.
What sort of technology exists to actually define the perimeter itself? So what are we going to utilize?
So in most cases, a traditional Air Force perimeter, you'll find an assortment of fences, traditional chain link fence with a signage as a legal demarcation for what property the Air Force owns. As far as securing the fence, you have a range of cameras, sometimes ground-based radars or other sensors that will give us an early warning of anyone who might be trying to come through the perimeter or breach the perimeter. But think of like a very versatile security system, cameras, locks, signs, lights, all those kind of things can be employed in various ways in the perimeter.
Cool. So Jonathan, I'll ask you this question, because you haven't spoken yet. What sort of breaches are we trying to guard against?
So Mark, the breaches can be a variety of anything. We can't speak to anything that the real world that has happened potentially with the Air Force, but that could be a personnel breach, could be a vehicle breach. As Barry already mentioned, we have a lot of hobbyists out there right now with UAVs, and the commercial UAVs are fairly capable these days. So there's a lot of interesting things that are happening at Nellis Air Force Base, and Mr. George Halton already kind of alluded to that. Nellis in particular has quite a varied mission set, but every base has some unique things happening that the American public sometimes just gets curious about. And now with UAVs, they have the capability in some cases now to send a drone over. We have high-powered cameras. They can hold a camera up over the fence or through the fence. And sometimes people get a little bit too interested and potentially will breach that fence physically, either on foot or via vehicle. And at that point, that's when organizations like security forces would step in and address that.
I'm assuming some of these perimeters do not have a fence necessarily. Is that correct?
I can't really speak to any specific cases, but that would be possible in some cases where the installation or range or whatever it might be is so large that potentially there may not necessarily be a defined fence. And you would, he already identified, Pat Matichek had identified maybe an airplane crash. So that is something, right, that may not necessarily happen on the installation. It could happen someplace else in public land, but it would still be a concern to watch. So there in many cases, there is a fence. Other places, I guess it would be possible to have maybe more of a open environment.
So we have this idea of integrated defense in the Air Force, which a fence is one part of. That's typically, you're going to find that's the outermost barrier. But then between the fence and what we call the resource that we're protecting, maybe it's a fifth generation fighter aircraft like F-22. There's a number of different techniques and technologies that are employed between the fence and the plane, for example, that we would employ. So the technologies that we're looking at today, absolutely, if we can detect it at the fence or as far out as possible from the resource that we're concerned about, it gives us more time to react and more ability to defend our sensitive technologies and aircraft that we're trying to protect.
Cool. Thank you very much. So, Todd, not heard from you yet. Any of those previous questions that you would like to kind of respond to, or if not, I can ask you a fresh question.
Yeah, I think to just kind of highlight on what we talked about, and for myself coming from the Eglin Air Force Base area, which is 365,000 acres or miles of acres of a range. That's a big range. And you're limited resources, so there's only so many people you can put out there. So ideally, you want to have things that are connected. You want to have things that are employing a little bit of artificial intelligence to help kind of filter, false identifications, false cues, to help optimize the human force that's behind that and the reaction teams that are out there. So to reduce the burden on them through whatever autonomous sensors that are out there that are connected and that kind of technology to make it smarter and to reduce the human load. So ideally, you don't want a sensor to a person ratio. You want 1,000 sensors to a single person, given especially the distance, time and space.
Cool. Thank you. So I'd like to now switch it to really defining what we mean by autonomous systems. So I would like to ask the question, what are the advantages of using an autonomous solution for perimeter security as opposed to the alternative?
So the Air Force has recently shrank in size as far as manpower goes, so that means that where manpower is smaller, we need to augment with technology and make our defenders, our security force members in this case, more effective. So one person can cover more ground, can respond to threats in a more timely manner, and they're just all around more efficient. So the advantage of the autonomy is it allows me to maximize the limited forces that I do have and cover vast areas, react quicker, and then just be more efficient and more timely and stop threats earlier.
Anyone else would like to answer?
Sure, let me piggyback on that. people sometimes get nervous when you start talking about autonomy, thinking that machines are going to take over the world and run things. And that's really not what we're talking about. Autonomy just means that systems have enough intelligence to be able to do the tasks that they're assigned without requiring constant and overarching human inputs and interface to constantly tell them what to do, where to go, what to look at. Autonomy's got to be tied to artificial intelligence and the innovations and technologies that are now available there to be able to make it effective and really provide the human in the loop, not having the human provide 24-hour constant surveillance of it. Anyone like to add?
So, question then. I guess, again, one of the things that we're trying to look at here at AFWERX is connecting the commercial world with the military world. Have any of you seen anything out there in the commercial industry that you think could be, you could actually look at as an example to inspire what we're not looking at?
Absolutely, Mark. So Mr. Saltman and I had originally, a few months ago, seen a story that Nevada Energy started using some drones. They were testing some drones for inspection of high-tension power lines. So what they were trying to do, very similar to this perimeter security, they were using a drone to look at a fixed asset. It would not be moving around, it would be pre-programmed. And so they were trying to maximize their limited personnel to mitigate some safety concerns of inspections around high-tension power lines and cover some more ground. So that was on some local news channels of a quadcopter or helicopter of some sort, all unmanned, that they were using. And that got Mr. Salt and I thinking, and I know that the security forces for some time, that they're always looking at sort of that multi-layer of security. And it's always good to add, continually modify and add to that security posture for not only our bases that we control and are responsible for procurement, but all installations in the Department of Defense. So we kind of laid that discussion over the top of looking at something that is on the commercial marketplace, potentially in some homes today, and that's the Roomba. So we have a robot that has a variety of different sensors on it. It sits on a docking station, and when it's programmed to relieve the docking station, it will undock itself. It'll perform its task, very much similar to what Barry mentioned already. It has the program that's already installed, and then as it senses that the battery is getting low or that it's completed its tasks, it will then associate itself with its surroundings and then redock and then charge for the next outage. So we kind of tried to look at that and said, okay, why did the Roomba come about? Well, it came about because people don't want to spend time vacuuming anymore. In our case, the Department of Defense, one of the issues that we were trying to mitigate is the reduction in personnel. So kind of laying two different commercial applications together and saying, well, maybe that could potentially work for the Air Force.
Todd, have you seen anything?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I know Todd definitely wants to speak to this as well. As a representative of industry, what I have seen obviously is a rapid growth in the unmanned capabilities and just companies that are interested. I entered this field 10 years ago, and it was almost 99% Department of Defense structure. It's almost and 1% commercial, if you will, and I'd say it's at least 50-50 or greater favoring the commercial entities now. Lots and lots of companies and lots of entrepreneurs and inventors have great ideas. The challenge that they have is how do they get their systems seen by the DoD, seen by the Air Force, and then even incorporated. And Todd can speak to this as well. The unmanned vehicle market today is dominated by several small number of manufacturers. Most of them provide tried and true vehicles that are currently involved in combat. So it's very difficult for new entrepreneurs to break into that market. AFWERX is going to provide a perfect forum to open that door, and I think that's going to be a great area, especially if you focus on unmanned systems to start with. That will be the leading edge for other things that can also follow.
Thank you. Kind of talking some specific applications that are out there that are going on that are going to really, the industry is going to thrive, especially the commercial industry is going to drive innovation and possibly even break those barriers of the companies that have kind of stranglehold on there. both in sensors. I mean, a lot of FLIR cameras that are being used by the UAVs. I know that our pricing, when I was at AeroVironment, was really actually driven by the auto industry. So those same cameras are sitting in Mercedes and BMWs. That's what was driving the market down for that, not the UAV industry with the DoD. Secondly, there's a lot in different sensor applications that are out there that are now proliferating. Just like the power line sensors, there's also in the environmental side, they're using drones to go out and inspect ships that are coming into our ports to look for their carbon emissions. And they assess those carbon emissions and then determine if there's a fee that has to go against them. Well, having an autonomous drone that has a sniffing sensor, well, you can use that in a chemical biological environment as well to send them out autonomously and inspect things that are coming in further out before they become a threat. I think one other area is also that's really going to start driving, I think, the DoD drone industry, especially in autonomy, is what's happening in that last mile delivery segment for folks like Amazon, UPS, and just other entities. They've done the pricing model. There's a company up in Reno, Flirty. They've been experimenting up there. They're already cleared in Australia for the entire country to deliver pizzas. Already been approved. We don't have the final system to do it yet, but they're already ready to do that. That is going to be, it's going to drive, it is, that is. So imagine the science is going to go behind that and the commercialization of that technology, because that's autonomous. They're going to work within corridors, cities, over people, the safety aspects of that. That's all being driven. And the dollars associated with that last mile, folks like Amazon and things like that, those are large dollars that are going to push the market. And we're going to benefit from that autonomous technology that's out there and leverage that.
You know, our Colonel's already mentioned the power line surveying. There's another similar example like oil pipelines. So both of those examples are sort of linear surveying and drones flying, except tracking and being more efficient, reducing manpower that's committed to it. That perimeter fence would be similar to that. And then we were talking autonomy earlier. So as batteries are often a limiting factor on the drone because of the weight and the time that the drone can fly, if it happened to be a drone solution. There are companies out there that make sort of robotic battery swapping stations. So a human doesn't have to go land the drone, manipulate it, and change batteries. That can all be done automatically. There's other solutions like induction that are looking at sort of long-range surveying, where a aircraft will fly over and then charge the batteries autonomously without ever landing. So those kind of things are interesting. They're innovative, and we could certainly probably find ways to apply them to our purposes. There's other sort of software algorithms like change detection that's used a lot in vehicle searches and things where if you're looking for what's different to key in a security person to closer inspect, we think those same kind of software applications could be applied for a fence. Maybe the solution will recognize a cut in the fence and enunciate it so someone can go check it out and look for evidence or look for an ongoing intrusion. Maybe it can detect tire tracks coming over some soft sand that weren't there on its last track. So just things like that that will, artificial intelligence will be applied to vector in a security control a human to go investigate, would cut down time and make us more efficient.
Well, you've got the mic, Jonathan. I see this next question to you. I want to push this to you, Jonathan. Okay. What are you, everybody else can answer this, but what are you hoping to, I guess, to get from this whole AFWERX process for you? So the theme that we're setting for this month of February is going to be around perimeter security. We're pushing it out there to the broader community. If anyone is interested in this problem set or thinks they have a solution, to kind of contact us, and then we're going to go through that. But what are you hoping to achieve from this?
I'd like to say we're excited to be involved in this process. I think we often are seeing problems like this and are somewhat constrained by the processes that the government has to go through to procure new solutions, especially being at the tactical level or operating here on NILIS. We're not always in a position to express our problems directly. They get filtered through, and it takes a lot of time. So from AFWERX, we're excited about the prospect of this rapid collaboration and hopefully innovation, and ultimately building something that will make us more effective and more capable to benefit the security of the installation.
I'm going to ask each of you this as the final question for the questions from the audience. Don't know, would you answer that? What are you hoping to get from this?
Mark, I would say that you know, a lot of problem sets exist in the Department of Defense. And typically the way that those are resolved is you find a project officer who will have to champion that, and they have to find some funding, they have to find some time to develop that problem set, to maybe engage with an industry solution, they have to engage with industry. There's essentially a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through, and during that whole time they have to perform their normal day-to-day mission. So I think the idea, the concept of AFWERX, basically, you know, helping basically be that project officer and make some of those connections happen, will be really beneficial to our partners, not only here, but greater enforcement and Department of Defense.
Certainly. So from my perspective, representing industry, I look at this as a great opportunity to enhance and increase the government-private partnership that sometimes is lacking in today's contracting. No offense to my contracting brothers, but in industry, obviously, we're supporting the warfighter, but we are also constrained by spending money up front, making proposals, creating products, what have you. And there is a profit loss equation that goes with that. By having the AFWERX doorway, if you will, into that acquisition process, I think that can improve the contributions that industry can make, and that industry's financial contributions can have more value add by having this as more of a partnership as opposed to a competition.
I think especially being a defense works AFWERX person, ideally, you know, what we hope to get out of this is that we do find some new ideas, that we are able to do something with velocity, and then most importantly, that that new idea gets in the hands of an operator and it actually does physically solve a problem in that. I think to be able to bring in divergent thought, some non-standard players to the scene, to be able to flip some ideas and come up with some new solutions, maybe a little bit more innovation. Ideally, that's the goal. Typically, the Air Force, we know who most of the big industry players are. They all answer the request for information on federal biz opportunities page. And so we've got there, pretty much know what they have. But for us to be able to blend those folks with the warfighter, with some non-standard participants, and then really maybe see something amazing come out of it, something fresh, and then something fast.
Cool. Well, I'd just like to thank my panel. We're going to open it up to questions from this audience as well as from the digital audience. Before I do that, just the topic that you've heard today, if anybody here or anybody listening or watching wants to kind of connect with us, probably the best thing to do is to go to our AFWERX website, which right now, as of this recording on this day, is afwerxdc.org. That may change going forward, but we'll definitely redo it. But that would be the best place to go, and reach out, get on our mailing list, get on our contact lists, come for a tour to our facility here, reach out to us in any way you can, and we'll do our best to connect you. So with that, opening up to questions. Any questions, firstly from the audience? John, I'm going to give you a microphone.
Okay. Thank you. My company we're industry, we're post-crime security, can you hear me?
Yeah.
And so in the past, we worked with the U.S. Geospatial Agency by providing satellite imagery to law enforcement. And basically someone would call 911 and, you know, there's a crime happening, and they would provide us the imagery. We would process it, streamline it, stream it to their phones or laptops or command centers, and they would see the crime in real time. And so I believe that my program was suspended because of Edward Snowden, and that's another story. But anyway, have you guys thought about using satellite imagery and partnering with not only industry, but with the U.S. Geospatial Agency in D.C.? They are also a government entity, to provide this kind of security for the parameter of the Nellis and other Air Force bases?
So in the continental United States, as I'm sure you're well aware, there are some limitations on what systems we can use here at home. I know, of course, if you're in a deployed environment, those constraints are less. So there's a realm of capabilities that we can deploy to look at perimeter defense. Personally, I'm not aware of anything that's been used to do that sort of real time as you described, although I do know there are some metropolitan police departments in the United States that are looking at using drones for something like a mass casualty event where you have a crime scene that is just so massive and you can capture that from the air in particular and be able to document a large crime scene. For our purposes, there's some applications that it could be used for, but I'm not aware of it being utilized personally at this time.
And would you be willing to partner with partnership using this organization to kind of team up and partner with the possibility of using satellite imagery to secure your perimeter? Because that's something that can be applied here in this program.
Yes, sir. I think in this case, right, we're just looking at the problem set of just perimeter security. In this case, talking about autonomous
Right.
satellites essentially meet that. They fly in pattern or they're fixed. So that would not be out of the realm of the possible. So I would say that it would be absolutely a possibility.
Okay, thank you. One last question. How fast can an idea from industry here become a solution using this new process? What do you see the time? Is it a month, a year, 6 months?
We've seen it so far.
I think we talked, yeah. It really, that answer really depends. In the end, let's say what would be the stop, or the limiting factor in that would be, are they really ready to receive that and have funding behind that? So that solution, we've done hackathons and we've actually solved some problems that weekend. We've done a 2-dayer and there's been a solution that has been coded or physically produced. I think the industry side, the measure of success of true solution is, are you buying it at that point? And so then that really then depends on, is it a commodity item that you can just go purchase at that point? And occasionally that happens. So there are a lot of, I would say, new, fresher ways of contracting for things like that. But it could happen in one session, in a tech sprint, a 1-week prototyping event. That solution's there. And then, some of the wins, and they really don't get highlighted down in Tampa with SOCOM, but having been a business development guy in industry and understanding what it's like to plan your year and commit to what your orders are going to be that year, you really need to know that there's opportunity there. And it does happen. People have gotten contracts, they've gotten awards, millions of dollars for assets, for things supporting those projects.
So funding has already been allocated, a specific funding for any ideas that come out of this group?
For this,
Yes.
I think they are, our Air Force folks, they are teeing up funds to be able to do that. That process is not fully streamlined. I think for those that were here earlier, Liz was talking about the team that's getting put together, because in the end, you need money, have a project lead and a contracts officer. That's how you get paid, right?
Okay.
And so as that gets done, the Air Force is committing dollars to be able to work on these things. And in our world, we call those collaborative project orders, where we're going to take on a project, fund that, and that could last a year, it could last a week, it could last several months. We'll bring the industry folks in, and then that ends up, it's a real solution going out as something that can be funded, or maybe it goes to a program office if it's something that they've discovered that maybe needs a little more development. But ideally, that quick win.
Thank you.
It requires those 2 parts.
Thank you.
Bob, is there any question from?
We do. We have a question from Patrick Filbert. How do we respond now if a breach by drone is determined on a base?
So how do we respond now if a breach is determined by a drone?
By drone.
Yeah, by a drone.
So I can't speak too much into specifics on security responses, but I would like to stress that right now, this, whether it's a drone or whatever solution we're talking for this is an idea. We're not currently employing this type of technology, but we like systems or sensors that allow us more time to know what's happening as far away from the base or the resource that we're protecting as possible. So in general, further out, the better, and then I can vector controls accordingly based off what I see or what's enunciated on some kind of alarm center. Any questions?
One more from Patrick. Has use of the casino security model been considered?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Filbert is asking there. So if he's able to provide a little bit more discussion on specific techniques or technologies, we might be able to answer it, but I'm not exactly sure what he's after on.
So again, we don't know the full question or what was behind that, but I think what we may be referring to is the casinos have a fairly comprehensive camera system installed into the casino and around the property. And so that's been looked at too. And again, going to what Captain Manichek had talked about with layered security. So some of that is already in place. The issue becomes when we have very large test areas, or just very remote areas, and so that is a power. You have to provide power out there. You have to provide network connectivity. So obviously, the larger the installation, the more remote it is, the more climate issues we have, either extreme climates of very, very hot or very, very cold. That wears on the system. So there is a lot of on installations worldwide. There's a lot of camera systems. Now this is just another layer to that, providing a little bit more mobility. You figure your typical camera system is usually fixed, and so you can control it, you can move based on the operator's controls. This is basically just putting that camera onto a platform that can then collect more information, as Captain Manichek there.
Thank you. Question?
Yes, I have a question. My name is Ray Richardson from Sapphire Innovative Solutions, and I have been a part of bringing some of the drone test site here to Nevada, and some of the partners are here. And the military has been noticeably absent in some of our testing because we're involved with NASA and FAA, and some of these solutions that we're testing, I don't think the military is even seeing. So my question to you is, going forward, how do we work with AFWERX to get the Air Force to come see what we're doing? Your solution may be out there already because we're doing testing. We just haven't seen you guys been a part of come out and see what we're doing. We got something going on first part of March up north. We're doing some testing. And so that I think there's value if you come see what we're doing, get some ideas and see what's really going on in the commercial sector, because the military has been absent.
Sure, we'd be very interested in participating. Mr. Salton and I had, again, back to the original discussion, we saw the Nevada energy application, and then also just knowing a little bit about drone capabilities. I mean, well, it's only drone, but we know a little bit about some of what's out there. And for really a few $100s, you can buy a commercial off-the-shelf drone that has some of these capabilities. And I would call it point-to-point, at least. You can identify the elevation that's going to fly, when it's going to change elevation, and what path. You program that in early on, and you let it fly. And most of that is developed because your first drone users crashed their drones, and then there went hundreds of dollars. So to make it easier to fly, and basically most of these hobbyists want for right out of the box flight operations. We figured there probably was at least some commercial application out there. AECOM is one of many companies that's providing some capabilities out there. The DoD has been using those. They have public announcements of some of the contracts they've let, particularly in the combat areas for drone operations. Most of that is flown. So that means there's a pilot there, whether that is a DoD individual or a contractor. But we're trying to basically remove that human element in this case. We would love to be part of that. You can either give us your information directly or share it through AFWERX, because then the greater DoD community will pick up.
So that's the beautiful thing about this facility. You've been here a couple of times now, so we're starting to build a relationship, and you can certainly reach out to us here at the hub in Las Vegas, or alternatively putting in information into the AFWERX ecosystem. But yeah, please let us know. So we'll certainly try and connect you to the right people within the Air Force that maybe should go and have a look at it, or could have a look at it. Alternatively, one of our team here at the hub could go and have a look at it as well. But keep in the conversation flowing is important. Any other questions from our audience here in Las Vegas or digitally?
We have a question from Aaron Erickson. Can you expand on how today's topic of perimeter surveillance ties into your larger event in June?
Sure, I'll answer that. So so at AFWERX, we do a number of different things to try and connect with the community. One such thing is what we're doing right now with our First Friday events. We're going to be having showcase events at this facility also. But then we're putting on some larger events, external events. One of them is going to be in June. We're not sure on exactly what the date is yet, but most likely it will be to move a lot of that end of June. That's going to be a 3-day event at this stage, and we're planning for it. There's going to be 1 day of kind of educational, where we're going to be inviting some subject matter experts and speakers to a sort of conference style facility, where we can learn more about this particular topic of perimeter security and using unmanned or UAVs, UASs. There's also going to be 1 day, which will be a counter UAS event, which AFWERX has been running. And the finalists from their event are going to come and showcase it probably at a range somewhere. We're looking at a minute for that. And then day 3 will be an expo, demonstration day, where on this particular topic of perimeter security and using UASs, we'll be inviting people in that have previously submitted their ideas to come in to showcase them. Again, in a sort of a conference style thing, where we'd have a booth, maybe some video footage, maybe even if it's appropriate, actually demonstrating it as well live. So we're still in the very early planning stages of that event in June, but we'll be releasing the information as soon as we get it, so we're locking some dates and venues, and then we'll be sending out requests once we really understand the problems that we're looking to solve. We'll be reaching out to our community that have pre-registered through our AFWERX website to let them know that this is happening, and then we'll be marketing that as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent, excellent. If you look at the screens here, we have a question from Marty Waldman. What's the path forward for AFWERX to examine existing disruptive technologies available from small businesses that have TRL 6+ technology available, the existing SIVers and contracts? It's an example that he gives there.
No, I just found out what SIVER stands for. I know the S and the B is small business, innovative research. There you go. So one of my jobs is to learn acronyms. Would anyone like to answer this question?
I'll take it.
Okay.
I think of how we would do that. We've talked about these expos and things like that, and actually back to your comment as well. As we develop kind of how we communicate and how we interface with the Air Force effectively and efficiently to highlight those things that they're looking for, I think those are the processes we're going to be working down. But I think one of the big successful kind of processes that SOCOM's use, we've used it at AFWERX, we'll use here, are these tech expos. And they're real easy to do, and ideally it's a matchmaking session of tech to operators to the Air Force. And so I see that we would have a lot of those here, and that's how we would kind of re-highlight some of this tech that's being developed out in the labs that are just not getting highlighted to the folks that could solve their problems. So finding ways to articulate that, to archive that, and make that better available to the folks that want that information. I think that's going to be one of our challenges. And the physical side, the expos are a pretty good deal, where they're kind of tech focused. So it's not just across everything under the sun, but then also digitally with some of the applications and things, the databases we're trying to establish, to be able to effectively allow them to search and get these logged in, these tech solutions logged in, so people can find those and matchmake those. So.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, and we have one from Jackson Laberman. How do we reconcile to the traditional defense acquisition system processes with this new AFWERX process? As it is, the DoD is constrained by the DAS and the complex process details.
Before we answer this, can we just explain what the exact things are? I'm assuming Department of Defense. DAS, what's that?
It's
Talent
acquisition.
acquisition system, okay, so that's above, and AFWERX with now. Okay, cool. So I guess the question is, there is a traditional acquisition system and process for contracting, and we're trying to create, an alternate one here through AFWERX.
There is an established process, and so Barry kind of highlighted some of those challenges. And those challenges exist for some firms, they exist for others. He might have challenges in one area and another firm. It is a little, it can be slow at times, it can be rapid at times. It just depends on what type of authorities we're operating under, what type of mission sets we are trying to meet. And then also depending on if we have to develop anything. We talked about CIBR already, and that is doing some research. If we have to do some research on the front end of that, that can extend that fielding timeline significantly, depending on how much research. So I think the AFWERX model, though, is showing that our Department of Defense leadership is interested in speeding up that process and basically taking a weapons system development and fielding from decades down to hopefully, what it might just be a year or months versus in some cases the standard process. That has been the acquisition community in the Air Force, as well as a variety of other services, has been trying to tackle that for some time, and they have made some great strides. But in some other cases, that I think they continue to, will continue and should continue to cut that process down and make it a little bit more quicker, more rapid for our customer base, and advantageous for industry.
Thank you. And I think to really expand on that, it fits in many places, this process in the acquisition system. It can fit in the pre-acquisition phase. When we did the first prototype session, year one for the Tactical Assault Light Operators Institute, Dallas, down in SOCOM, was that it became an event where we better define the requirement. And so typical fashion in the acquisition system is you have the warfighting commands that develop the requirement and they write it. Sometimes they write it from a perspective of, this is what I have and this is what I'd like it to do, but I really don't know what all it could do. And what we find when we do one of these sessions, if we can truly bring in some of the top subject matter experts and even some divergent thinkers and national lab folks, that their goal becomes better defined and possibly it's a higher level requirement because they now know what the art of possible is, because it's very much informed by what's going on in industry. I think one of the examples when we were doing Joint Stars, they wrote the requirement, spec a specific processor chip for the computing system, and lo and behold, Motorola's cranking out a new G4 chip, and Apple's driving that development, and it was an order of magnitude better capability set if we went with that. But we spec'd it, that one at least they fixed and went with what was out there. So, and I think one of the key takeaways on that event was you had multiple vendors in the radio section. So they're going to do a new radio system for the exoskeleton. And you had folks like Harris and Thales all in the room. They together actually came together and created a new architecture and requirement jointly with the warfighter in the room and all the vendors there to say what is truly the art of the possible for these folks. And they came away with a specification, a requirement, and a new architecture that industry agreed on, but also contributed to, and it was way better than it ever would have been trying to just write that on your own. So it's pre-acquisition, it's during the acquisition phase, and again, it's possibly new and fresher ideas that make it better.
Cool. One more. Okay.
Good morning. By way of introduction, my name is Ken Evans, President for the Urban Chamber of Commerce. Very quickly, 80 to 85% small businesses, several of which are interested in inventors, patent holders, or people interested in doing that. And personally, I'm a retired Air Force engineer. I applaud the integrated, innovative approach that AFWERX represents. My question would be, I know we're focused on perimeter security from an Air Force standpoint, but might there also be an application? One of the good things about the military is we'll come up with something, and maybe 5 or 10 years later, you find it, a civilian application. So I immediately see where, depending on how fast we can deploy this, there would also be an application, for example, Border Patrol. So my question would be, are there already avenues in place or possible whereby you could not only facilitate the military application, but you could also facilitate the civilian application as well?
Yeah. Okay. So actually, in our charter at AFWERX and the partner intermediaries, there are many institutes that are out there. Wright Brothers Institute, the BRIC, which is part of Virginia Tech. The U.S. code that actually established the institutes was specifically tech transfer and tech transition. And that was the driving factor of why we got it. One was to extract the IP out of the labs and get that to industry to stimulate the economy, is the bottom line. For industry to have access to some of those innovations that were owned by the government that you could get for free. Also taking tech transfer, tech transition of capabilities to both the commercial sector and the other DoD entities. So it is specifically written in our charter. We actually have folks that are dedicated to that position on both the government side and on the institute side, just for that. So although we don't have one here yet, our kind of home mother institute in Fort Walton Beach has a tech transfer individual that is their only job, is to look and data mine IP from in that location, the lab, at Air Force Research Lab, but also from these events to get the word out and say, if there's something that has been government IP, to get that out there, or to then share the success story to the other DoD entities, Special Operations Command, the Army, and all that and so forth. All the institutes are talking across the DoD and the other agencies. And we have Coast Guard's coming in. So again, that's part of Homeland Security. They're looking to come in and see what's going on here. And ideally, things that are going on here, they're going to want to be informed of. And
I think I'm correct in saying that dual purpose is something that
it's
advantageous.
It is foundational to what we do here. Yeah, exactly.
Because there's a lot of investment in the commercial world, some investment in the military world. The application can be crossed, as you said. So I think dual purpose is a good road. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so with that, we'll end our panel today. So give me a round of applause for our panel. Thank you for taking the time, especially putting on face. I know that it's not always easy to do, so really appreciate it. And thank you to our audience for coming in and asking questions, and our digital audience as well for participating. I see a lot of comments going through on the feed. We'll be releasing a video of this as well, so people that couldn't make it to this live event will be releasing it as well. Thank you all. Thank you.